So thanks for joining us. I'm here with two of the authors of Lead Together, Brent Lowe and Susan Basterfield. Hello.
Hi, Lisa. So good to see you.
Hi, friend.
Hi, great to see you both. Thanks for having this conversation. I just recorded this series called The 5 and 5 on ways to use your values to thrive in the modern world of work. And we know that that's a bit of a challenge in the best of cases, right? And so I realized that there's also this beautiful chapter in the Lead Together book, which I had the honor to be the narrator for. So I listened to myself narrating it, and then I read it again. And I wanted just to ask you all a couple questions about it. Yeah?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Actually, before we even get into that, here's a spot quiz. So what's one value that is alive for you in your work now? And I'll think about it too.
I can jump in. I was thinking about this morning, actually. Honesty is one that I've been thinking about lately in the coaching work that I do. I think honesty is one of those things that we all want to say that we're honest. We all believe that we're honest. Sometimes it takes some real effort in engaging with others, and as a coach, being with a client, it requires some effort sometimes to step into true honesty and do it in a way that is healthy. And so that's one that I've been thinking about.
I've been thinking about care. I know that I'm quite tender these days, and approaching every conversation with care and care, gratitude, and maybe a little bit more patience. I think those are what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah. I love both of those sets. And I also find that myself and my clients are a little tender right now. We're just a little maybe tenderized. We've been beat on for a while, maybe. And so the value that's been really raising its head for me lately is acceptance. And acceptance of the things that I would normally go like, Lisa, just, get over yourself or get over that or whatever, maybe just accept that state a little bit. Yeah. So thanks for that. So you have a chapter called Values, Principles, and Aspirations in the Lead Together book. And you'll have to go back into your memory banks for this question. Who or what was the inspiration for this chapter? And why did you know it had to be in the book? Those may be different questions, different eras of answers.
I can take this one. I think that we, in the previous book in Reinventing Scale-Ups, there was a chapter on values. But we added aspirations, I think specifically because I'd had a recent experience of being challenged around team agreements, social contracts, that so many times, we come into new teams or new organizations and we say all these pithy statements of values about we want there to be trust, we want there to be transparency, we want to be honest, all of these things, right? But we're not really quite sure we can do it yet, right? Or what that looks like specifically for us as a team. So I got very attracted to this idea of aspirations, like setting our stall out in terms of what we want to do, what we think we can do. But because we're not kind of saying that these are our values and we're going to forevermore live by them, by naming them aspirations, that almost organically makes them be more of a, if not an experiment, but something that we reflect on regularly to say, okay, we aspire to this. How did we go against this? So I really feel like, especially when you're working with new teams or with teams that haven't ever done this before, or with organizations where there aren't already embedded values, that seemed really important. What about you, Brent? What's your recollection?
Similar. I was really drawn to the concept of principles and adding that in, because through my work with organizations, and I'm thinking about an organization I'm working with right now, where we're going through the process of helping the team distill their working principles that they want now. So the organization has been around for about a decade, and the work that they do is very personally meaningful to everyone on the team. And values often become very personal to individuals. And so if you have an organization, this case is 60 people, and we're trying to come up with an alignment of values, that can be very tricky because they are personal. So then we added in this concept of principles as agreements, really. So what are we going to agree to together as the things that are going to define how we coexist, co-work together? And because if each of us here, for example, had the same 5 values, personal values, but they were ordered differently, then even that creates, a mix that might be hard for us to resolve. But if we shift the paradigm to, well, what can we agree to? Then it becomes much easier. So I think, for so much of writing the book, it's been very organic we wrote, so this is really technically our 3rd book, and each one built on the last. And in between each book, we had more lived experience with clients and in our own lives. And that has led to where we ended up in this chapter.
I love just one last thing on principles. I like to think of them as boundary conditions. That for me has made a bit of a shift for me as well.
This is one place where you take a pretty hard stand in the Lead Together book. There aren't that many places where you're like, okay, here's our stand, but this is one of them. Let me read the quote. Compared with some of the other ideas in this book, this section on values, principles, and aspirations may feel jarringly staunch. It is intended to be. We posit that we can't and won't walk through life as our whole selves if we are constantly asked to renegotiate and acquiesce our core principles, our uncrossable lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, we had a lot of conversation in pulling this chapter together. And there's 3 of us. Travis isn't here with us today, but the 3 of us that co-wrote together. And there were certain chapters where we went back multiple times to have conversation. And this was one of them. And I think what we were really aiming to speak to coming out of those conversations was that it can be easy to sit in a room and come up with a list of values, as Susan said, a pithy list of words. And then it hits the test of the real world. And if our values, principles, aspirations are wobbly and are vague or are easily bendable, then are they really values? Are they really anchors? So spending the time, and it's not easy. So the one thing that we don't want to suggest is that coming up with these are always easy. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're very tricky. But are they going to stand the test of time and the test of the real world?
Yeah. You also take on values and power in this chapter. And what I'm feeling is a shift of people knowing and claiming their personal values as being a really different opportunity in the modern world of work compared to the past. So who had the aspiration around shifting or naming that? Or where did that come from?
I'm going to leave that one for Susan.
Yeah. I'm asking questions that we don't know who is the answerer to.
I don't know exactly, but I sense that it has something to do with my tension and anxiety around this idea that we can somehow shoehorn our values into the company's values or vice versa, right? I don't think that's possible. And I think that that can be heartbreaking and damaging and false, right? I think about all the years that I spent in big multinationals paying branding agencies, strategy organizations, hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with values, right? So they could be the slogans that are put around the walls or on the coffee cup or on the t-shirt or on the new website. And the idea that then it was up to us as individual components in the corporate machine to make sure that our values were merging with the organization's values. And that never felt either practical or possible to me necessarily, because, you know, an organization is a collective of humans and relationships. It isn't a machine that can like say, this is my value, right? These are things that have to be negotiated and that emerge from working in a team over the course of time. But one thing that is true is what I feel is real for me in terms of what do I need to be able to do meaningful and significant work? What are my uncrossable lines? What are the things that you need to know about me to figure out if we can be good partners in this work? Those are things that are unassailable. But conflating the two, I think, as I said, is dangerous and can be really damaging.
Mm-hmm. So as a way to start moving into wrapping this up, and you've probably said this in different words, or maybe there's going to be something new that comes forward from this question, but I was really curious if you can think about what's the one thing you want to affect in the world through this chapter on values, principles, and aspirations.
I think what comes for me is awareness. You said earlier when we were kicking off, it's like this sense of being able to be more aware that values are at play. Whether we know it or not, they are there. We have values. And by making our values more visible to ourselves, to know what it is that we believe in strongly, and then being able to ask ourselves, okay, how do these work okay with the organization values? Or are they, as Susan said, crossing boundaries? And sometimes they just, they're on two different sides of the fence, and that's not going to work. And so the more that we can be aware, because if we can get alignment around a sense of the values that we hold personally, the aspirations that we have in working together, the principles, the agreements that we can create with each other, then we have a strong foundation from which to work. If we don't have those, we can be very rudderless and just moving with whatever the issue or the new person of the day is. So that would be it for me, Susan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, I just feel like also to express that they don't have to be these really gray things, right? Like, this is the hill I die on. It can be a lot of fun. I worked with a team, a big organization, and their travel, each of the teams used a different protocol of decision making that they were allowed to create for themselves. And the little travel team did values-based decision making, right? And so I think their two values that they'd agreed on as a little pod was provide a magnificent service for our internal customers, do right by the organization in terms of what we suggest, and make it easy. And so it was so simple for them, and you could tell talking to them when you talked about this revelation that they've had, how liberating it was for them, right? That, wow, we don't have to call each other to double check. Like, we know, because these are values that we've expressed ourselves, that as long as we're working based on this collective energy, then our decisions are going to be great. So I think finding ways to make them live, whether through decision making. I work with other organizations who every month will find examples in the organization of somebody expressing a value and share that with the group, tell stories. It's great fodder for storytelling. Make them alive, because even if you don't share the value, you understand what it is. And it's kind of a universal language that I think that we can really be using to be more human at work.
If I may, Lyssa, just add one last thing in. The book Lead Together is all about how do we move away from a traditional hierarchy to a much more ecosystem way of working. And having values and principles becomes a necessary element of working that way, because in a more traditional hierarchical organization, at the end of the day, the values of the organization, the principles of the organization are whatever the folks at the top say they are. And when we're trying to move away from that model to one that everyone can lead together, we do need to have those boundaries. We need to have some agreements in place so that it doesn't default back to one person always making the decision. And I think that's really why this chapter, one of the reasons this chapter is so important to us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. One of the things I so appreciate about the Lead Together book is that it moves from these very large topics, like you just talked about, Brent, moving into an ecosystemic way of working to something incredibly practical to actually instigate that, or to at least one pattern that works. And so in the chapter, there are really good ideas for how to define values. So I'll just leave that as a little carrot dangling out there for other folks. They can get the book or the audio book. And that's what I love, is that it's super, super practical and also quite provocative. Good stuff, y'all.
Thanks,
Lyssa.
you.
You're the best.
Yeah, thanks for being with me and for having this conversation.